Do you guys notice anything different about today's talking head video? Here is how it usually looks like. Do you see a difference? If you don't, here is the side-by-side comparisons. Do you see the difference in the background blur? This is exactly why you should consider picking up the 24 f1.4. Play the intro. Hey guys, what's up? My name is Bernard and welcome to the channel. At the point of making this video, I just passed the 1000 subscribers mark. This is a milestone for me and I'd like to thank everyone for their support and for being on this journey with me. If you're new to this channel, do consider subscribing to help me hit my 2021 goal of hitting 5000 subscribers. Let's get back to today's topic, the 24 f1.4 prime lens. If you were to ask me about this lens a few months ago, I probably wouldn't give it much thought. But thanks to big time YouTubers like Mark Bone and Peter Lindgren, their constant recommendation got me intrigued. I did a quick research and found out that for the Sony E-mount, there are only two options for this specific focal length and aperture. The Sigma 24 DG HSM or the Sony 24 G Master. Also, I'm starting to realize what GM stands for. It means goodbye money. Anyways, the Sigma DG HSM means that this lens was not specifically designed for the Sony system. It is a lens that was designed for DSLRs and an adapter was just added to it, and it is now sold as a native E-mount lens. However, this does not mean you should write it off as a potential lens for your Sony cameras because it has a few selling points. Looking at specs alone, the G Master looks like the obvious choice as it wins in almost every factor except price. Before I review why the Sigma is a viable option, I would like to thank Camera Rental Center for loaning me these two lenses to make this review. One of the top questions is usually which lens is sharper. Let's take a look at a few sample images to find out. These images were shot with the A7R III, which has 42 megapixels and color corrected with the exact same settings. For all you pixel peepers, here is a cropped in image for you to analyze to your heart's content, since peeping in this context is acceptable. Please do not do any other forms of peeping as that is illegal. If you are in Singapore, you will probably understand this joke better. Here is the same image shot at different apertures. The G Master is noticeably sharper in the center and even more so in the corners. From what I see, the G Master lens is consistently sharper than the Sigma. However, that is not to say the Sigma is not sharp. That lens actually has pretty good image quality. Let me just throw in an image shot with the same focal length on my Sigma 24-70 to get a quick comparison. I wanted to see if I should be buying another lens when I already own one with the same focal length. At the widest aperture of both lenses, the zoom lens is slightly sharper, but that changes the moment you compare them at the same aperture. The prime lens then produces the sharper image. For the first example, we focus on image sharpness. Let's now take a look at the bokeh of both lenses. In this particular example, the subject was backlit. From what it seems, difference in sharpness between both lenses are less distinct than our previous tests. But you can still see that the G Master is ever so slightly sharper. As for the background separation from the subject, I think both lenses perform brilliantly. The bokeh on both lenses is great, but they do look slightly different. The background blur of the Sony G Master is more creamy, while the Sigma produces more circular bokeh balls. I think it boils down to personal preference for this, and personally, I prefer the look of the Sigma. I am also including the same image shot on my Sigma lens to show you how different f1.4 and f2.8 looks. Here is another example, this time with the sun lighting the subject. In this series of photos, I don't see much of a difference in the background blur to pick one over the other. Both lenses are simply amazing. Once again, here are a few shots from the Sigma 24-70 to showcase the difference in image quality. I think that definitely justifies purchasing this prime lens despite already owning this focal length. As I mentioned earlier, the Sigma was not specifically designed for the Sony system. Therefore, some might be concerned about its autofocus capabilities. The next test is on autofocus performance and we'll first experiment on it in photo mode. I am shooting with the A7 III, which has decent autofocus performance in the Sony lineup, but it is definitely not the best. Here is me running towards the camera. The best videos are the ones you can make while getting a good workout in so you can optimize your time. When shooting at f1.4, autofocus performance seems alright. I repeated the same test at f2.8 and results were slightly better but were more or less the same. Next, I did the same thing with the Sony lens. You can see that more shots were in focus with the Sony lens both at f1.4 and f2.8. However, some shots were still out of focus, but safe to say, autofocus performance on this lens in photo mode is superior than that of the Sigma. With that said, I would like to point out that the autofocus on the Sigma is still acceptable. In fact, it did better than I expected. Perhaps the earlier example of me running towards the lens is too extreme. This time, I'll be walking towards the camera at a normal pace. As expected, results were much better and more shots were in focus. However, some shots were still out of focus. For the record, earlier when I was taking photos of still subjects, I did not find autofocus performance to be a problem at all. As for the Sony, most shots were in focus, but on occasion, some of the photos were slightly out of focus. Perhaps this problem would not exist on systems with better autofocus like the A9 or the R4. I would still trust it enough to use either lens or moving subjects, but there is a risk of a photo or two being out of focus. Let's now take a look at autofocus in video mode. We will first be testing out the tracking performance on a subject. I am using the A7S III for this, which is one of the best autofocus systems in the Sony lineup. From what it seems, both lenses perform very well. In case that was too easy, let me try tracking my dog with YouTuber's popular autofocus testing method. For obvious reasons, you can see why I'm only conducting this test with my Shiba and not my Labrador. I will now do the same test, this time with eye autofocus on. I think that the G Master holds on to focus better and faster. The Sigma also performed well, but there were times it went out of focus. However, the focus shift was very natural looking and it was acceptable in my opinion. Before we wrap up this segment, we will do one last test, which is to see how accurate and smooth the focus shift is. Focus area is set to center and I am moving the camera with my hands. From what I've seen so far, the G Master has superior autofocus while the Sigma lags behind a little. However, the difference was not as big as it was in photo mode, and I would gladly trust the Sigma to do well in real life shooting situations. So considering that the Sony is smaller, sharper, and has a superior autofocus, does it mean that it is the obvious choice? Not exactly, because the Sigma has two things going for it. It is the cheaper option and you can save yourself some money if you go for this. But more importantly, the Sigma is much better when it comes to manual focus. Although the G Master is pretty decent when it comes to manual focus, it is not great because it is focused by wire, which means manual focusing is not as consistent and it is much harder to do repetitive focusing. As the Sigma was designed for DSLRs, it still goes by mechanical focusing, which means you have full control over your manual focus. For professional videographers who tend to stick to manual focusing, this is the obvious choice as it is so much more reliable. That is why I say that the choice between the two lenses is not as obvious as one would think. If you're a photographer or a videographer that is going to rely on autofocus a lot and want to cut down on weight as much as possible, I would definitely recommend the G Master if you have the budget for it. If you're a professional videographer or a landscape photographer that doesn't rely on autofocus, or if you're someone on a budget, the Sigma is the one to go for and you still get outstanding image quality for what you're paying. I hope this video has helped you make a decision between the two lenses. It really is going to depend on how you plan to use the lens. That's pretty much it for today. It's a wrap!